Hello to all of you from around the world. I want to welcome you again to another edition of Soulivity Today, broadcasting live from our studio right here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and on KMET 1490 AM radio in Southern California. You know me, I'm Brian Westley Johnson, your host, and we have a fantastic show coming up for you today. I'm joined by Soulivity senior contributor and beautiful co-host, Dr. Chanel DeGuzman. Chanel, it's been a minute since we talked, so I'm going to say, how have you been, girl?
Good morning, Brian. Somebody told me yesterday they were borderline sensational. And I was like, I like that. I like that. I'm not going to
I
say I'm
love that.
borderline. I am sensational. I'm feeling great. Had a great meditation prayer this morning, just like you did. But yeah, all is well. We've been having the most beautiful weather here in Michigan, Brian. And I have been soaking up this sunshine like you would not believe, and just had some incredible, start to my week. So doing really, really well. How
All
about
right,
you?
I like that.
Mhm.
Well, my wife's bike group had their annual get together down on the eastern shore of Maryland, and I'm gonna tell you, there's something about when brothers and sisters get together, break some bread, and just have a good time, and there's no
Oh my
drama.
goodness. Yes. Oof.
The weather
I
was
love it.
perfect. Yeah, the weather was perfect. There was some thought that, oh, well, fall is like coming. Girl, it
Mhm.
was 82 yesterday. So I don't
Right.
know.
That's exactly how it's been.
And I'm like,
That's perfect.
I have zero complaints. Zero.
Yes.
So
Yes. Life is
it can
good.
stay like this all the way until spring. Spring can just come again
I
if it
would
wanted to.
I was thinking the same thing. I wish we had weather like this all the time. I love fall because of these fall colors here in Michigan. And then
Right.
when you have beautiful weather like that, it is picture perfect.
Uh,
So,
mm, 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 mm.
yes.
Well, listen,
Mhm.
really want to get into today's show. Thank you for being here and being available to share your thoughts. Each year millions of Americans face the reality of living with a mental health condition. But mental illness affects everyone directly or indirectly through family, friends, or even coworkers. That's why each year during the first week of October, the National Association of Mental Illness, or NAMI, with participants across the country, raise awareness, fight discrimination, and provide support. So today we want to have a robust conversation about, you know, how in the world, in many ways unseen, the world is coming together to battle stigma and negative attitudes toward mental health symptoms, problems, and help seeking, which is the number one barrier to changing the mental health dynamic. And we have a very special guest who has become my brother from a different mother, Mr. Kevin Fisher, who is the executive director for the Michigan chapter of the National Association of Mental Illness, or NAMI. And I'm just going to say, hey, fam, how you doing, brother?
What's going on, bruh?
We get so excited when Kevin Fisher graces our broadcast.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Because again, like you, he brings the noise and the funk to this discussion of mental health. It is something that's important to you, Kevin. It's important to me. I mean, we both kind of talked about our family dynamics toward and personal connections to mental illness. With me, it's my mother. With you, it was your son. For people who don't know your story and how you got into being a mental health advocate, can you share briefly your personal connection to this mission?
Yeah. So in 2007, my oldest son, Dominique, was a sophomore at college, doing very well academically, socially. Came home for Thanksgiving break, and his mom and I immediately noticed some changes in his behavior. He was having some grandiose thoughts, and we assumed that maybe he'd gone off to school and experimented with drugs or alcohol. But
Mm,
after a lengthy medical exam, the doctors informed us that there were, in fact, no drugs or alcohol in his system, but they were going to put him on a 72-hour psychiatric hold, which came as a complete surprise to us. It literally like hitting a brick wall at 100 miles an hour because Dominique had not exhibited symptoms of mental illness to us. So what we quickly learned, and I say this and I use the term for a reason, but I mean it respectfully. What his mom and I quickly learned is how ignorant we are as a society to mental illness. And ignorance is just what we don't understand, what we don't know. And because of the stigma, which I know we're going to talk about a lot today, but because of the stigma associated with mental illness, most people don't want to know. Mental illness is what we call an invisible disability because people don't look broken. They don't look, So anyway, we quickly learned we didn't know anything. And so for about 2.5 years, we floundered trying to understand his illness. Dominique was diagnosed with schizophrenia and then bipolar disorder, which means he heard or saw things that were not there. And then he experienced extreme highs and lows. There was times that he we'll use the term, so depressed that he couldn't get out of bed for days. And then there were days when he was experiencing mania where Dominique could go a week without sleeping. And that's the bipolar effect. But anyway, we really struggle. And I got to call out Chanel here because Chanel truly is my sister. Chanel and I have known each other. I'm sorry, Chanel. I know we don't talk about women's ages, but I've known Chanel like over 30 years because her husband is my brother from high school. And so I bring that in because Chanel is she's very attached to this because she was a part of this journey. Chanel and her husband, Gary, and her family is our family. So they saw what we were going through. But unfortunately, that journey came to an end for Dominique on June 27th of 2010 when we lost Dominique to suicide. And, here's the thing. And this is the point of our conversations. We talk about stigma. Nobody dies of mental illness. Dominique's death certificate doesn't say he died of schizophrenia. It doesn't say he died from bipolar disorder. Stigma killed my son. And what I mean by that, and what I want our audience to understand is stigma is powerful, man. And Dominique was doing very well in his treatment. He was taking his medication. He was exercising. He was going to therapy 4 days a week. Dominique was doing the work we asked of him. Unfortunately, when family and friends learned of his diagnosis, they stigmatized him. And it wasn't malicious. It was through ignorance. And people were saying, don't let nobody tell you crazy. I mean, let's, like you said, we're going to have a real conversation. In the Black community, it was, don't let nobody tell you crazy. Don't take that medication. You don't know what's in that. Don't do this. Don't do that. So Dominique dropped out of his treatment. He stopped taking his medication. He stopped going to therapy. It was very short after that he started self-medicating with marijuana and alcohol. And 3 months later, my son was dead. And I truly believe if people had just left him alone, if you don't know what you're talking about, stop talking. If this child has chosen this path, and I didn't choose it for him. Dominique was an adult. I helped him. I supported him on his treatment path. But if you don't want to take medication, then that's your business. God bless you. But don't tell somebody else who's trying to get help for themselves, because we don't tell cancer patients, don't go to chemo, don't do radiation. We don't tell heart patients, don't take your medication. So with mental illness, if you don't know, don't say anything. So that's what brought me. Yeah, that's what brought me to this world of advocacy. And in full disclosure, and we can talk about us men. And I want to make sure I add some data here. People who lose someone to suicide, not necessarily parents or family members, people who lose somebody close to them to suicide are 10 times more likely to attempt suicide themselves. I've always considered myself to be an incredibly resilient person. As a matter of fact, some people refer to me as arrogant. But when I lost Dominique, there was no bounce back for me. And I
Mhm.
continued to spiral deeper and deeper into a depression. And
Wow.
in about 6, 7 months after I lost Dominique, I started planning my own suicide because,
Mm,
and I just couldn't live with the pain. And the myth of people who die by suicide is you took the easy way out, you're weak, you wanted to die. I've never wanted to die. But I
right.
told God, I can't continue to live with this pain every day.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
Mhm.
so I became an advocate in part out of anger. I was angry that I lost my son. I was angry that I didn't know how to save him or help him. But one thing led to another, and it brought me to this world of advocacy. And I don't like the way I got here, but I believe it is God's work that I'm doing. And I love being in this space, able to help the other Dominiques of the world who didn't get the help that they needed.
Right. 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 Well, number one, we're glad that you're here and you're doing this work. And um, I know that I've learned in my own life that if everything's fine, a lot of times we don't move.
Hmm.
And so God gives us those ways to move where we have to be uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And so I fully believe that your son is now an angel and a guiding star supporting
Hmm.
you in your work and other people. So he's still here. He's just on the other
Oh
side,
yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Dominique
Um,
walks with me every day.
see, there you go. There you go. There you go. Chanel, did you have a question?
I don't know that I necessarily have a question. It's just like Kevin said, I watched, some of this journey. What I learn every time is how Kevin was able to experience this pain, which was obviously so real. And I know, there continues to be, times and journeys along the way. It's evolutionary, right? This pain journey that we're on, the grieving journey that we're on, but being able to, perhaps get the help that you needed, Kevin, what was that like? So that while you were in that spiral and, not being able to get out of bed and, you know, in addition to using that anger to propel you to advocacy, what kind of mental health support did you latch onto or that you sought out to help you during that process before you, really started getting into your power of advocacy?
Well, first is I got a therapist. We
Mm,
cannot be
Mhm.
afraid to get therapists. So I had a
Yes.
therapist. I joined a national support group for parents who've lost children.
mm,
The two biggest supports for me were my faith. And it's interesting because I was at an event this past weekend and I was telling a gentleman about it. And he's of Catholic faith. And the one question he pinned me down, he said, Kevin, how's your faith now? And
mm,
Mm.
mm,
I can tell you, honestly, my faith is stronger than ever. And that was
Mhm.
a journey because when I lost Dominique, I lost all hope. And
mhm,
so
Mhm.
that's been a rebuilding process for me. So my faith was key. The other is my wife. I remarried just after Dominique passed. And
wow,
my wife, Sonia, was of tremendous support to me through his illness. Sonia and I had started dating just months before Dominique was diagnosed. Now, I'm going to go off script here a little bit because, and I want to keep it real.
go on,
You
bro,
know,
please.
us men, yeah, well, us men, we get into relationships and I'm older. This is my second marriage, and we say, well, I don't want to get involved with with a woman who's got kids. I don't want to deal with all that baby daddy drama and all that stuff. Look, here's the reality. And my wife has two children from her first marriage, and I have two from mine. And yeah, there are challenges that comes with blending families and all that. But then
Right.
I got to look at myself. I
Mhm.
brought a full grown man with serious mental illness into a brand new relationship. And I remember
Mhm.
having a conversation with Sonia and say, hey, you really up for this?
Mhm.
Are you up for, because I'm the
Yeah.
one bringing the drama.
Right. Right.
And the very thing she said to me, she said, whatever we need to do to take care of your son, we are going to do.
Mm.
And she has
Hello.
Wow.
steadfastly stood by that. And Sonia didn't even know that I was experiencing suicidal ideology after I lost Dominique. Sonia knew I was
Wow.
struggling.
Right.
Sonia would get up
Right.
every Sunday and say, Kevin, we going to church. You need to come to
Mm-hmm.
church. And I was just like, baby, I can't. And for months, I
Mhm.
could not go to church. And it wasn't, I didn't want to.
Right.
I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I could cross that threshold, because when I lost
Right.
Dominique, I felt like I failed him. I failed
Right.
God. I failed everybody.
Right. Right.
But
Mhm.
Sonia, and to us men, she didn't nag. Just every Sunday, she said, Kevin, we going to church. You coming? You coming? And at some point,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I'm ready to go back.
I'm ready.
But she
Right.
has
Mhm.
always been there. And when Sonia, us men worry about our supports emasculating us, because we can't cry in front of them. We can't say, baby, I'm
Mhm.
Right.
hurting. I'm hurting.
Right.
Mhm.
But
Right.
Sonia has always been there. She has held my head in her lap while I cried. It has always been whatever you need. And she said, Kevin, at that point, Sonia hadn't even lost a grandparent before. So she said, I cannot imagine your pain.
Right.
And she said, I
Mhm.
may not know what to do. She said, you may have to tell me what to do, but whatever you
Mhm.
need from me, I will do. And she has, she's been right there. So you got to have a rock in your life. And I'm one of these people that,
Absolutely.
you know, God knows me. And I've always said
Right.
this, God knows me. As Luther said, I'm not meant to be alone.
Mm.
God gave
Mhm.
me a helpmate. And
Mm.
the
Yep.
day that I planned to take my life, Sonia was with me. I went to my son's gravesite on the year anniversary of his passing with a gun and a small in my back, and I planned not to come home that day. Sonia
Wow.
didn't know, but she was there with me. And I literally prayed and I said, God, clearly I won't do this while she's here, but I can always come back tomorrow.
Right.
And
Mhm.
God said, you asked me for help and I sent it to you. All you got to do is
Right.
take her
Mm.
hand and we
Hand.
will lead you
Mhm.
through this.
Woo. Woo. Brother, brother, brother,
Wow.
brother. Listen,
And
listen.
and
Yeah.
Ryan, I can just she is a angel. She is an angel. The way that she came in and just went with whatever Kevin needed, whatever support that he needed. And I'm so grateful.
Well, I I'm really blown away. Um, I know you've told me some of that stuff, Kevin, about you and your wife, but thank you for that testimony today, and that and sharing how grateful you are that you have that person, this beautiful woman in your life who's supporting you, and has supported you through something that is, well, in many ways, I think we believe this is unnatural, right? Our children are not
Hmm.
supposed to go before us, right? That's just
Hmm.
no, no. And so to deal with that, listen, we're going to take a pause. We're going to let that kind of sink in with people, because I wanted to make sure that we centered our conversation in some reality, right? Around what actually happens, what's going on with people's lives. You are one of them. I was one of them, and the power that one moment with people coming in and bringing that stigma along changed the whole dynamic of what was happening. So listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into what is this stigma, right? How does it show up?
Mhm.
And how can we identify it, and how can we take some steps to get it, to tell it to get the heck out of here, and let us continue with with supporting ourselves and our loved ones. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes with more of Soulivity Today. Soulivity Today is brought to you by Assume control over your weight and broader health with the 80 Bites program by Physical Mind Institute.
For 50 years, we've been told, load up your plate with veggies. Load them up. Because all this spinach, look at it, all the spinach is only 100 calories. But avoid fat, because a tiny sliver of butter is also 100 calories. So spinach is good, butter is bad, right? But not today. Now we're told, put butter on everything, even in your coffee. Why? Because fat doesn't spike insulin, as carbs do. And stretching the stomach with all those veggies unbalances our digestive hormones. So eat healthy today means fat, fasting, stomach control, right here's the stomach. Forget calories. Hormones rule, and 80 bites is the solution.
Are you ready to take that first step towards true, unwavering inner happiness? Are you like thousands of people who have everything they need, not want, but need, and still can't seem to find happiness and fulfillment in their lives? If so, the Steps to Happiness show is for you. On my show, you will learn about the principles and practices that lead to true inner happiness. Because guess what? It isn't found in our external environment, but within ourselves instead. Together with my guests, we will explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being practices. And together, we'll advise you on the actionable steps you can take towards a happier, more fulfilled, authentic life. So I invite you to join me each week on Soulivity TV on the Steps to Happiness show with me, Teresa Greco.
Hey, we're back here with more of Soulivity Today. We're talking about some of the information that you need to know to battle and support yourself in getting through mental health illness, either your loved ones or your friends or your family. We're here talking with Kevin FISCHER, who is the executive director of NAMI in Michigan. Also here is our Soulivity senior contributor, Dr. Chanel DeGuzman. We were left off talking about stigma. What exactly is mental health stigma?
So stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace on a person for a circumstance that they find themselves in. And in layman's terms, it's making a person feel less than. It's making them feel weak. It's making them feel that whatever negative circumstance they're in is their fault and their choice. And as it relates to mental health, people who are diagnosed with mental illnesses are made to feel that it's your fault. It's a weakness of your character. It's a weakness of your faith. You chose this. And I can assure you, Dominique did not wake up one November morning in 2007 and decide to play crazy. He didn't decide that, you know what, I want to be a burden on society. I'm going to throw all my goals and dreams away. He did not do that. And we need to understand, Brian, mental illness is a medical diagnosis. It's not a choice. It's not a weakness of character. It's like cancer, heart disease, diabetes. And we have to, when we talk about eliminating that stigma, we first have to accept that mental illness is a medical condition. It is a chemical imbalance in the brain that requires treatment. We can't tell people you need to focus harder. You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No, you can't bootstrap your way out of this.
No. You especially if you're in a situation personally, right, where your reality is completely different, right?
Exactly.
You don't even know what a bootstrap is at that point. All you know is that you're in pain, right?
Mhm.
and that you're just trying to make it moment by moment by moment by moment by moment. And yeah, there might be some periods where you're lucid, but for the most part, you're just struggling, trying to get through this day to day to day to day to day. I know that was true with my own mother, who struggled with this, with mental illness all of her life. Um, how can we recognize stigma? I mean, just to be very clear about this, because I want to make sure that people aren't minimizing
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
the importance of this, because again, we've talked about this offline in different conversations. Stigma is the number one barrier, right? Yes, there are other barriers, financial concerns,
Yep.
the lack of access to resources, lack of resources, those kinds of things. But the number one barrier is stigma itself. How does stigma show up? So that we can
You
really
know,
point our fingers at it.
if you blame or shame somebody for their situation, you are stigmatizing them. So a real quick, a real just down and dirty self check is if you say that boy acting crazy, he's
Mm,
not doing this and he's not. If you see yourself doing that, you are stigmatizing people. If you see
mm,
others doing it and you don't step in, you are stigmatizing people. And so to me,
Mhm.
that's the real kind of down and dirty way to identify stigma. If
okay.
it's your fault, then I just
Mm,
stigmatized you.
right. Wow. Wow.
Hey,
Wow.
hey, Kevin, I'd like to just tease that apart a little bit, as it relates. So I fully recognize. So, for example, you talked about, well, I'll just bring in, our culture, our American values of individualism, of independence. So, you've got to dig in there and make it happen, and you've got to pull your, you've got to make this happen for yourself, right? But
Yep.
there are some that have support around them who maybe have some level of awareness. So they are providing the support, but the individual has bought into the societal conditions of the individualism of, being independent, of being strong, of utilizing your faith, but they have internalized stigma. Can you talk
Hmm.
about that?
Yeah, again, and I'll kind of go back to the blaming. Um, we have, and Chanel, I love the way you said internalize. There are
Mm-hmm.
external forces of stigma, and then there are internal forces within ourselves and within our communities and culture. So
Mhm,
we have a tendency to think of them. That's a them problem. That's a they problem,
mhm,
not an
Mm-hmm.
us
mhm,
problem. So
mhm,
when we say he's incompetent, he's cray cray, he's acting crazy,
Right.
we're, we're that's an internal belief or mechanism that we've had where we don't want to be seen outwardly as a discriminating person,
Mm-hmm.
but internally we're telling ourselves this is his fault. He chose this because this would never
Right.
happen to
mhm,
me. This
Right.
would never happen
Right.
to
mhm,
my family
mhm,
because
Right.
we are of strong faith and we have, we're good people. We're solid people. We live in
Right.
a good community and we got good
Right.
jobs.
mhm,
So
mhm,
yeah, we do that. And I want to touch on, there as I mentioned before, we talk to them we talk about them in terms of racial disparities. And when we have that conversation, we're talking about the lack of access or resources to an underserved community.
Right.
But there is stigma within our community and culture. And I use Dominique again, the example of we in the Black community, you're not going to tell me I'm crazy. Even
Right.
though I know,
mhm,
even though I know something's going on with me, you can't call me crazy. I'm not going to let
Right.
this society call me crazy. And I
Right.
won't get help as a result of that because what we tell ourselves, well, if I get help, then I really must be crazy. Yeah,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
and
Right.
I don't like continuing to use that word, but it's crazy to not get help when you know you need it.
Right.
You
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. The whole
know? So,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Kevin.
no, I was just going to say, so to those of us in communities of color, let's not be our own worst enemy. Let's not be afraid to get the help that we need when we need it, because we can talk a little later about what that looks like. I'm really concerned about the way we use the term crisis as it relates to behavioral health care disorders, because our messaging is a problem. Our messaging is stigmatizing because we keep telling people, well, if you know someone who's in crisis, then act. We're
Right.
literally telling people you can ignore it until the person's a danger to himself or others.
Right.
Right.
When it's
That
too late.
Yeah.
that is
It's
that's
too. Yeah.
stigmatizing. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know, that was the dish. What you just put forth is an example of my story with my mother, right?
Mhm.
Where like your son, she was getting some help, but her family dynamic and the cultural dynamic stopped her from continuing to get that support until it was a crisis, until she had to be, institutionalized. She was
Mhm.
in and out of the hospital over a number of years, to the point at which she just stopped going, right?
Mhm.
And again, it's too late. Speaking of, what do we do about this? I'll first ask you, as the executive director of NAMI in Michigan, I am sure that you have been aware of things that nobody is aware of, because it doesn't hit the
Mhm.
news wires. It's not reported on cable or television. What are some of the things that you see that keep you up at night sometimes?
Unfortunately, they keep me up a lot of nights. But
I
Mhm.
it is
bet.
it
I bet.
it is the fact that we're not making the progress that we need.
Mm,
And
mm,
you've called it out a couple times already. Stigma is the leading barrier to the early diagnosis and treatment that leads to better outcomes. And what that means is the earlier we intervene, the better the possible outcomes. We have a much better survival rate if you are diagnosed as stage 1 cancer versus stage 4. The
right.
same
Mhm.
thing the same thing applies to mental illness, because again, it is a medical diagnosis. The longer you the more you ignore it, the worse it's going to get. And so we tend, again, to our messaging is, we tend to say, if you know someone who's in crisis, and the subliminal message there again, and people, this is not my opinion, this is what people are telling me. The
Hmm.
messaging is saying, don't act until a person is in crisis, until
Right.
they're a danger
Mhm.
to themselves or others.
Right.
Well,
Right.
you're allowing them to further harm themselves, and you're putting them and the community at a greater risk, because as I am an advocate and I fight every day to destigmatize mental illness, and I fight for the protection and rights of people who live with mental illnesses, I have to be honest and tell you this: untreated mental illness can be dangerous.
Right.
If you
Mhm.
ignore this, and I'll use Dominique for example, and thank God he never thought of hurting anybody else. But there are many people who we encounter who the voices in their head tell them to hurt themselves or to hurt others. As a matter of fact,
Right.
the one person Dominique hurt was himself. And I truly believe Dominique did, the day Dominique passed, I don't think Dominique was depressed. Dominique wasn't worried about money, housing, relationship stuff. I think he was off his medication. I think the voices in his head told him, if you want to meet God, this is what you need to do.
Right.
And so that's self harm. And I thank
Right.
God that he
Mhm.
never thought of harming anybody else. But the other things, so the things that keep me up at night is there's so much more we can do to destigmatize mental illness. The other is understanding that even though we commonly talk about the lack of resources that are available, we don't talk about the resources that are available.
Well put.
Because while, as you mentioned before, yes, there's a shortage, a significant shortage of behavioral health care professionals. There's a shortage of psychiatric beds. There's a shortage of funding and resource. There's all of that is true. But if you don't overcome the stigma and encourage people to get help, you can throw all the money at this you want to, and people simply won't come get help.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then it's that lack of awareness of resources and then how to access those resources in
Right.
as user-friendly a manner as possible, because accessing behavioral health resources can be very frustrating when you don't know what you're looking for and you don't know the right questions to ask. And so those are the key things that keep me up at night.
Right.
Wow.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Chanel.
no, Kevin, I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity. I know you, along those lines of being, things that keep you up at night, are also the increasing statistics that
Mhm.
further demonstrate that this is really spiraling out of control. Can you share some of those updated numbers with us?
Yeah, and first, the audience needs to understand that more people are diagnosed with a mental illness every year than the number of people who are diagnosed with cancer, heart disease, diabetes combined.
Wow.
So when we say
Wow.
you are not alone, you truly are not alone. More than a quarter of our population is directly impacted by mental illness every year. And then there's a ripple effect where in one way or another, we're all impacted. What's
Right.
really scary is, and I'll kind of rapid fire these, we need to understand that 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness onsets by the age of 14. 50%. So
Wow.
we have to make
Wow.
sure our kids are okay and they understand that it's okay to let us know when they're not. And parents, if your child works up the courage to tell you, or if you notice changes in their behavior that lead you to believe that they're experiencing some kind of mental health condition, please go take your kids to get help. Don't ignore it. Don't say, hey, it'll get better tomorrow. They're just having a bad day. If your child came home limping or bleeding, you would not say, we'll deal with that broken leg tomorrow.
Right.
You would do
Right. Here's some
something right then.
Tylenol.
Exactly. Do something about that. 75% of all lifetime cases of mental illness onsets by the age of 24. So it's not just the babies, it's the early adults. And Dominique fell into that sweet spot of
Wow.
especially for males when we talk about schizophrenia, is 18 to 22. The other thing is the suicide rate. Our suicide rate in the United States for 2022 is at a historic high. 49,499 people, and this is a number directly from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, died by suicide in 22. That is up by 5% from 21, up by another 5% from 20. One of the, if you want to call it, one of the
Wow.
benefits
Wow.
of
Wow.
the
Wow.
social
Wow.
distancing and staying at home for 2.5 years is that the suicide rate went down. Unfortunately, the experts predicted that when we came out of the isolation, that the rate would go up, and it did. And here's the reason. When people are sheltering in place and when you're feeling low, it's not that you're not depressed, because we do. We knew that uh, the instances of depression and anxiety increased during the pandemic, but we were all so down in the dumps that we didn't have the energy to act on it. And let me try to put that in context, Brian.
Wow. Wow.
Most
Wow.
think about the holidays. Around between Thanksgiving and Christmas every year, the media inaccurately reports that suicide rate increases during the holidays. That's not
Mm-hmm.
accurate.
Mm.
Thoughts may
Wow.
increase, depression
Okay.
and anxiety increase. But if you look at the numbers, and this is data you can Google, the suicide rate actually increases between April and August. And the reason for
Mm.
that is because we have more sunlight and we're outside, and people have the energy to act on the thoughts that they were having back
Wow.
during the holiday. So
Wow.
we have to be careful about that. And then lastly, this, even though the suicide rate is reported at a historic high, we need to understand that we in the advocacy world believe, we know that that's an underreported number, because
Mm-hmm.
medical examiners will only rule suicide when it is clear and undeniable. But there are people who are ruled accidental overdose when
Mm-hmm.
family members like, no, he told us he was going to do this. There are single car
Right.
accidents. You know, there are lots of
Right.
other deaths that are not ruled suicide that we know were deaths by suicide, but because it wasn't clear and uncut, the
Mhm.
medical examiner couldn't put that down. So
Right.
we need to
Mhm.
understand suicide's a huge problem, and we lose twice as many people to suicide in this country annually as we do to homicide. I'm gonna say that again. We lose twice as many people to suicide in the United States than we do to homicide. But when you turn the news on every day, what do you hear? Who got killed
Homicide.
today?
You know, Kevin, and my guess is the numbers that you just stated, the stats that you just stated, if you start breaking those out per communities of color, you got to add a plus, a times 2 or a
Hmm.
times 3 to them to get to the actual rates, right? Because I'm sure that
Yeah.
they're higher, that the rate is higher in the Black community, in the Latin community, you know, in other minorities. Am I right about
So
that?
in 2019 and 2020, while the national suicide rate actually declined 4% each year, the suicide rate in African American, American Indian, and Latino communities were still going up.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
so even when the rest of the country was doing better, it was swinging the other way for us. And that goes
Mhm.
to stigma again, because we don't get our kids help when we need it. Since
Mhm.
1999, the suicide rate in the general population in the United States increased by 35%. In the African American community, it increased by 78%.
See. Um, y'all, we got to do better.
Yeah.
We got to do better with each other. This. We understand it, but it still don't make sense. Let's talk. While we have some time left here, why don't we talk about the available resources? Because you and I have talked. You know, Chanel has been in on some of these conversations about there's resource. Yes, there's not a there might be a gap in access
Mhm.
and resources, but there's still resources available today for people. Can you talk about some of those resources that are available?
So there are many resources available across the country. We have what's called the community mental health system. And
Mm,
community mental health system is for people who are Medicaid eligible for the most part. And what does that mean? It means you meet certain income thresholds to get more affordable behavioral health care. But here's the thing that we need to understand about community mental health. Community mental health is the best and most immediate access to mental health care in most communities, because most of us don't know what resources are available to us. So your community
right.
mental health office, regardless of where you are in the country, they can filter through that. You can call them and say, myself, my child, this is what I'm experiencing. They'll ask you what your insurance status is, your income, and they can best connect you to the resources that fit your situation. I will see my great friend, Senator Debbie Stabenow, tomorrow. Senator Stabenow, I'm going to tell y'all, you know, she just announced a few months ago that she's not going to run for reelection. And so she will be done, I think, after 2025. But she has been the greatest mental health champion in Washington, D.C. in our lifetime. Senator Stabenow and now retired Senator Roy Blunt out of Missouri created something called CCBHCs, or Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics. This is a game changer. It is the most significant behavioral health care resource or legislation of our lifetime since John F. Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act of 1963. In just basic terms, there are more than 500 certified community behavioral health clinics across the country, and they're growing. What they provide for is anybody who presents to a CCBHC with a behavioral health condition, so it could be mental illness, substance use, they will provide you high quality treatment. So this is not some startup organization that doesn't have a history of success. These are the best behavioral health care organizations in your communities. They have to provide you treatment regardless of the severity of your diagnosis. And what's really important about this, and I want to be really careful how I say this, private practitioners can cherry pick, they can hand pick what cases they want. Some don't want the difficult cases. Some is, I want the mild to moderate.
Right.
If you go to a CCBHC, they don't cherry pick. They have to provide treatment regardless of the severity of your diagnosis, regardless of your insurance status, regardless of your ability to pay. So your income, none of that matters. And a lot of people, Brian, don't understand. Sometimes your private insurance is a barrier to the best care you have available. Right. Sometimes Medicaid eligible people have access to an array of services. And we're not just talking about medication and therapy. We're talking about social supports and things that help our overall well-being. In many cases, people who are, so let's not look down on the Medicaid eligible population is what I'm saying. Right. Because sometimes they have access to better care than those people who got six-figure incomes and the platinum insurance policy, because you got to check your insurance policy. We do not have what we call mental health parity in the United States, which means your insurance provider may not be providing you with the same level of behavioral health care as they do for your other physical health care benefits. So listeners, write down CCBHC, Google it, write down 988. 988 is the new National Crisis and Suicide Prevention line that launched last July. And so across the country, if you need services, 988 is the best resource to get that wherever you are, because they can direct you to resources in your community as well.
Oh man, thank you for that. Thank you for that, man. I wish we had more time, but we're going to have you come back, Kevin, and talk more about this and even more different dynamics that are part of this. I just don't want this to be, and you and I are working on something right now to make sure that this is just not a conversation that's happening once a year, right? Where it's Mental Health Awareness Month, or Mental Health Awareness Week. We talk about how serious it is. We talk about stigma. We give some resources, and we're gone till 12 months from that. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to continue to have this conversation. We're going to continue to make people aware and give them information about how to shift and change the paradigm, so that when there is someone, when our brothers and sisters are out here that are suffering, that instead of stigmatizing them, we actually energize them and energize them and empower them to go get some support, right? Which should be,
absolutely,
if we're talking about a faith-based kind of thing, what would Jesus do, right?
Yep.
Just to be clear on that.
Exactly.
So, thank you for being here. You're gonna be back. We got to get to some quick little plugs here before we go. Chanel, you got a wonderful, wonderful book that's out here right now, that I want to try to highlight as well as some of the services that you provide in terms of complementary coaching services. Why don't you talk about that first, and then we'll talk about your book second.
Sure. So first, I just have to say, I'm just so blessed to have my brother Kevin in our family, and for him to,
Yes.
have the courage and the power and the faith to continue to walk this walk and help, our society, versus stigma. So thank you, Kevin. And real quick, yes, if you want to unpack, where you are right now, you might be struggling. You may not know what's going on, but something is not right. Let's just have a quick conversation. If we have to refer and get you resources, a quick conversation will certainly get you off to the right start. So feel free to contact me for that consultation. And then with the book, yes, come back to yourself. You were born whole, healthy, and free. And so let's help you get back to that true nature to live life and love life and live free. So excited. That is on Amazon. Feel free to pick up a copy.
Woo, woo, woo. This has been a chock full day of information. Kevin, again, thank you for being here. Chanel, thank you for being here. While we have some time left, I just want to remind everybody, listen, this is how we do it here every day, every weekday on Soulivity Today. Please go check out our website at soulivity.com. There's some information there that goes across the spectrum of helping you design and create your best life today, including some support around mental health that's in there in our health and wellness section. Also, if you want to know what's going to be coming down the pike for us, follow us on social media. We're on all the major platforms. Listen, until next time, this is Brian Wesley Johnson, thanking you for joining us today. We're here every Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern for a live broadcast, or 8 a.m. Pacific on KMET 1490 AM radio. Until next time, keep living your life with passion, purpose, and to create a high quality life today. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other